class. Just wanted to check whether I'm going live or not. Yeah, so I guess I'm live now. So, welcome to the class, everybody. And this is a session that a lot of people were asking me personally to actually take with respect to preparing for the interviews. Because, as you know, the interview is one of the most important process part of the process. And if you look at the preparing for interviews session, the group of sessions that I'll be taking on an academy on the Unacademy CAT-alyst channel. Uh, so you know my introduction. My name is Arun Sharma, and I am an author with McGraw-Hill. The entire CAT series of books from McGraw-Hill have been written by me. Whether it is data interpretation for CAT, logical reasoning for CAT, or quantitative aptitude for CAT, all the books I have written. And on top of that, I'm also an IIM Bangalore graduate. I passed out of IIM Bangalore in 1995, and ever since after passing out, for the last 25 odd years now, I've been training aspirants to various MBA exams, getting through various exams. So whether it's a CAT, IFT, NMAT, the uh, the whichever question, whichever exam you look at in terms of the CAT, in terms of MBA entrance, I have uh, been training people for that. And in this group of sessions, as I said, I'm going to talk about helping you for preparing for interviews. How do you prepare for the interview process for the CAT, for the IIMs, and for the other top B schools? And essentially, I'll structure this discussion around two things. The discussion will be structured around one around pre-interview prep. Pre-interview prep will be one part of it, and the second thing I'll be doing will be inside the interview. How do you answer different questions? What kind of body language you need to have, etc. Right? So obviously, when you are talking about interview prep, the most important part of the whole game of your MBA entrance process is once you reach your interview stage. Because what happens in today's scenario, in today's MBA entrance scenario, everybody will have some calls or the other. So there's nobody who's without calls. And given that there's nobody without calls, and everybody has some call or the other, the whole idea becomes that you have a whole spectrum of calls: the great calls, the top calls, and the bottom calls for everyone. So for some people, I'm Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta might be top, MDI might be bottom. Other people might be having MDI as the top call. So if you're in the 97, 98 percentile range, maybe your top call might be MDI, and your bottom call might be a group of institutions which would accept you at the 90-95 percentile range. So essentially, and then of course, if you have performed worse than that, so you might have these institutions as your top calls and something below at the 80 percentile is a bottom call. So essentially, whatever score you have got in the exam, your focus has to be to maximize maximize the outcome of your top calls. Your top calls have to go through. Your top calls have to be converted, and there's a process that will give you that the best chance to do that. Now, when you are talking about preparing for interviews, the first thing you need to understand is what is the interviewer looking for. So, in that context, of course, the interviewer is looking at your personality in the interview. That goes without saying. But more than the personality, he's also looking at the character traits that you possess and your fit with their definition of an ideal student. So they are looking for these things, and through the interview process, they try to gauge these things. And to put it very simply, I often tell people that अगर तुमको एक पॉइंट से देखना है कि इंटरव्यू में क्या देखता है वो, what do they look at? They just looking at whether you have graduated from being has your graduation, not in terms of academics, but has your graduation gone through with respect to moving from a boy girl to a man woman. Have you changed? Have you moved from being a boy girl to a man woman? And if you can somehow show this movement, and this is a movement about content, it's a movement about confidence, it's a movement that gives you belief. So if you can show this to the interviewer, that you're no longer a 20-year-old boy, you actually now are a 20-year-old man, I think most interviews will take you. So of course this has certain aspects to it, and when you talk about preparing, as I said, I'm going to discuss this in two parts. Two parts I'm going to discuss this in. And the first part of this is pre-interview prep. So what is the pre-interview prep that they will ask you to do, or that you should do? So what will happen is you have to look at your own timelines, at your life timelines, and divide your timelines into your past, your present, and your future. And most of the questions, in fact 80 to 90% of the questions that you will face in an interview, can be predicted by looking at this timeline. So if I look at the physical aspect of this timeline, your past is 6 months ago, from minus 6 months from today. So if you're going for an interview in February, your past will be anything before October, September, October last year, 2019. 2020 February, if you're giving an interview, your past would be anything which is before September, October 2019. Your present for a February 20 interview will start from October 2019 and continue to 3 months later. It will continue to maybe April, May 2020. And then your future gets divided into three parts. Your future itself gets divided into three parts, and that is your 3 to 5 year future. So if you are talking about Feb 20, the first dimension of your future is 2023-25. The second dimension of your future is around 10 years. So that we are talking about 2030. And the third is the long term. This is also referred to as short term, medium term, and long term time frames. And hence, what are your short term goals, your medium term goals, and long term goals? So the long term is 20 years plus. So you are looking at 2040 easily when you're talking about the long term. So, when we talk about the pre interview prep, you have to basically scan your past, your present, and also plan your future. You have to have a very clear perspective about these three things. So, when you're talking about your past, for example, what all comes into your past, and hence what questioning possibilities emerge from your past. What questioning possibilities emerge from your past. So if you take a bunt on that, or you take a deeper dive into that, कि किसी के पास से क्या क्या questioning possibilities आता है, तो significant events, significant influences. So this in this part I'm talking basically about the pre-interview prep, the prep before the interview, right? What are you looking at? What are you thinking about, etc. Significant events, significant influences, and events can be broken into also, maybe this I'll write separately. Significant uh, successes, yeah, achievements, and significant failures, your cultural and your geographical background. All this forms past part of your past. Your academic history, your academic past, your academic history in terms of your grades and your performances, your academic decision making, why you took a subject, why you decided to do a graduation in a particular subject, why you took a decision to join a particular college, these kind of things. So, essentially, as I said, 90% of your interview will either be on your past, your present, or your future. 90% of it. So, if you scan each of these well, your past, your present, and your future, you'll start getting the list of questions, or you'll be able to create a list of questions which you need to prepare for. So, let me try to show you maybe some questioning possibilities that emerge out of these dimensions that we have put on this paint window. So just say for example significant, yeah, let's say let's pick up one of each. तो ये तुमको हर आदमी का of course individual profile अलग रहेगा, लेकिन this is something you should scan and try to find out what questions are going to be asked of you in the interview. So for example, uh, let's say you belong to a bureaucratic family. So it's a part of your culture, your cultural background, and it's also part of the significant, it's also going to create significant events and significant influence in your past, right? So stuff like the kind of people you were surrounded by, the kind of peer group your parents had, whom you learned from, in significant events from your past. If you belong to a bureaucratic family, what will come will be a lot of transfers and postings. So a lot of this would result in a lot of changing of schools and the environment, etc. And essentially, the basic scenario you're living under is that your past is influencing your present. So, who you are today basically is a function of your influences, experiences, decisions, thoughts, beliefs. So, what I'm trying to tell you here is that when you're talking about preparing for interview, pre-interview prep is actually a lot about going inside yourself and going into your lifeline, so to say, the timeline of your life, and trying to look for significant stories, significant stuff that you want to present to an interviewer. So there's a lot of introspection that you should do. There's a lot of introspection that you should do when you're talking about looking at your past. Uh, a business family, for example, a person coming from a business background or a business family background, on the other hand, has its own sets of challenges and learnings. So when you're building a story, whether it is a bureaucratic family, a business family, some people have a single parent family, etc. You are basically scanning all this to come out with stories which will attract an interviewer towards you, right? So for example, let's say you've studied in 6 schools because you come from a transferable your father comes from a transferable job, hence you changed 6 schools during your school. You can present this that, sir, one of the critical influences coming from a bureaucratic family in my past life was the fact that I was my father being a bureaucrat, and we and his job being a transferable job. Every 2 3 years we used to shift locations, shift uh, and hence I had to shift schools. So because of that, I had to shift from. I had to learn to adapt to new environments, continuously learn or meet new people, new teachers, new friends, adjust to a lot of scenarios, new cities. So that has made me a very flexible person. So that's how you build these things into your story. So you have to basically scan. So do an in-depth scan of this. So significant influences में family background आ जाएगा. Significant events में कुछ major चीज आ जाएगा. Death of someone close, maybe a major achievement in school, a major failure in school, right? A family crisis, a financial crisis in the family, whatever you look at, all these things will come into significant events of your life, and based on that, you will try to build your story about what you want to say, specifically in questions like, for example, one of the first questions that is asked of everyone is essentially introduce yourself. And a lot of people, I've seen a lot of times, what people do to the introduce yourself question is that they just look at, sorry for this noise from behind, I'm just coming to your answers, Jinay. They just look at, in the introduce yourself question, what they do is they just look at, or they just talk about what they're doing and what their graduations, etc. are. So please remember that the introduce yourself question, in the introduce yourself question, you do not even need to say your name. Although you might want to start off with your name because it's a comfortable thing to do, but even that is not required because that's there with them. So you have to talk about everything outside the biodata. And if you can nail this question, for example, the introduce yourself question, if you can nail it, your interview selection is by default defined then and there, right? So I'm trying to show you how to actually prepare for this. And essentially what happens is when you talk about the standard questions in the interview, introduce yourself, tell me something about yourself, tell me your strengths and weaknesses, all these questions that are asked, they all their answers essentially are in this research. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people preparing for the interviews. They don't even do any kind of research in this part, right? So academic history, very good academic performance, poor academic performance followed by a rise in academic performance. These are things you want to actually showcase. If you had an excellent, you were topper right through, please showcase it in part of your academic history. You had a normal mediocre background of academics and then you suddenly grew towards your last couple of years. You have to showcase that. You can talk about that, the fact that you're not so focused or not so uh, intense towards your, or not so dedicated or committed to your academics during school, but as you grew up and became a 14, 15, 17-year-old child, you reached that age, you started realizing that you need to do something about your academics and you started picking it up. So anything like that will come up. Any significant subject choices academic history में तुम्हारा not just 10th, academic history में not just 10th, even your 12th and your grad, everything comes. So your decisions about why you chose a particular subject, all this is things you want to talk about, right? So for example, let's say for example, I was talking to this student of mine who's got an interview from the IIMS, and he has a problem that he was for the last 1 year, for the first 1 year of his graduation, he was an engineering student, and then he dropped out of engineering and went into BCom. So now this can actually be a very uh, dangerous thing to defend in the interview. But if you actually take it positively and you show this, that this is a glimpse, or this is an example of the courage of my own convictions that I have against everybody's uh, against everybody's advice and everybody's good meaning advice, I took this decision to quit engineering after a year and move to a subject which I wanted to study rather than engineering. तो इस तरह से अगर इसको प्रेजेंट करोगे तो वो सेम चीज़ जो नेगेटिव है वो पॉजिटिव हो जाएगा. तो आइडिया ये है कि जब प्री इंटरव्यू प्रेप करते हो, पास्ट में यू हैव टू लुक एट दीज थिंग्स. If anybody has any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, I'll move to the present. So present is the last 6 months to the last to the remaining 1 year. So present में तुम्हारा जो investigations होगा about yourself -6 months to +3 months. That's the present investigation about yourself. So your character traits, and you have to link this to your events in the past, because who you have become is a function of what you were in the past. So this character traits, strengths, weaknesses, right? What are you doing? How did you come about doing that, etc. Everything should fall into this. लास्ट 1 ईयर से क्या कर रहे हो? जैसे अभिषेक पूछ रहा है कि 2018 पास आउट है और 2 साल से अगर कुछ नहीं किए हो तो लास्ट 1 ईयर what significant things have you done? If no job, then what did you learn? How did you develop yourself? All these aspects will come in this. And finally, when it comes to your future, you have to talk about being clear headed, at least, about where you want to be heading in the 5 year, 10 year, and 20 year frameworks. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in my next session, which will happen tomorrow. But your 5 year, 10 year, 20 year plans and how an MBA connects to that. This is something that you have to be very clear about and make a strong structural relationship between how an MBA from this particular college helps you towards your 5, 10, 20 year goals. So Jinay is asking me this question: not scored very good in CMAT, starting with CAT 2020, commerce background. Is there enough time to score 98 percentile? Yeah, you have around 10 months. That's quite enough to actually score 98 percentile. But of course, it depends on where you are to start with, and also what your learning capacities and your learning speeds are. Right? So if you have any other questions, you're free to ask them. Otherwise, I'll just want to talk about the last message, that is about Unacademy Plus. Unacademy Plus is a great way to study for CAT, and not just CAT. Unacademy Plus has the subscription model. It has subscription model preparation. Under the subscription model of Unacademy Plus, you can subscribe to Unacademy Plus for a period of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, even 2 years. And if you take the Unacademy Plus subscription, you get access to all the teachers and all their courses during the entire period of your subscription. And in case you do decide to join Unacademy Plus, you can use my promo code. This promo code will give you a 10% discount. It's also running on the ticker in the session. It'll give you a 10% discount on the Unacademy Plus subscription. Arun.yt is the promo code. Just use that. You'll get a 10% discount on the existing fees. So Abhishek's question, let me just handle that. Abhishek is saying that he has a call from TIS Hospital Administration, and you're from engineering background. So ideally, for engineering background, you really don't want to get into hospital administration. See, an MBA is more of a generic course. It allows you, the biggest advantage of an MBA is that it allows you to go into any field you wish to. All the fields of business, and even various aspects of specializations like finance, marketing, everything opens up the entire industry to you, so to say. Whether you're talking about business, you're talking about social impact work. You're talking about developmental banks, joining stuff like Asian Development Bank, etc. All this is open to you if you do an MBA. So typically, if a person is going for a course like a hospital administration, he should be very clear that this is what I want to do in my life. Otherwise, what you're doing is that you're basically closing out the other avenues. तो एमबीए का मेन एडवांटेज है कि वो तुमको क्या करता है, इट प्रिपेयर्स यू टू एंटर एनी इंडस्ट्री. So you have 10, 15 industries, 20 industries, 25, 30, 40 industries, and you got access to all those industries the moment you do an MBA from a good place. तो उस context में hospital administration typically does not fit in. So I will, especially if you are an engineering background, this is not something I will advise you to go for, even though it's from a good college like this. But it will be better that you prepare for CAT again and go for a generic MBA, which will open up. So best part क्या है ना कि अगर तुम generic MBA करोगे तो hospital administration भी तुम्हारे लिए खुला रहेगा, और hospital administration करोगे तो sports management तुम्हारे लिए नहीं खुला रहेगा, finance का sector नहीं खुला रहेगा. You can't go into banking sector. This thing, you only have to go into hospitals. So what that does is that constrains your future with that industry. So if that industry grows at whatever rate that industry is growing, you can't grow better than the industry, more or less. So I hope that answers your question. And it was a pleasure talking to all of you on Unacademy CAT-alyst. I'll be winding up now for today, and I'll see you again next time. Tomorrow is my next session. Look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Bye bye.